The moon hangs heavy in the sky, an ominous, blood-red orb that casts a cold, eerie glow upon the land. It hovers above a forgotten village nestled in the lowlands, a place that seems untouched by the passage of time, yet ravaged by its cruelty. The cold is palpable, seeping through the very fabric of existence. The winds blow relentlessly, howling to the skeletal trees, their bare branches groaning like the voices of lost souls. The damp earth, frozen by the first frost of the season, crunches underfoot as the night presses down with a suffocating silence. There are no sounds of laughter, no warmth in the hearths, only the distant, mournful cry of an owl that pierces the stillness. Inside a crumbling stone house, barely standing against the ravages of time, a figure stirs beneath a pile of tattered furs. The fire in the hearth is but a few embers, its warmth long since dissipated, leaving the room filled with the biting chill of the night. A young woman lies curled up on the floor, her breath shallow, her body trembling from the cold. Her name is Annalise, and the warmth of her childhood home feels like a distant memory, lost the brutality of fate. The small, fragile flame in the hearth is the only thing standing between her and the creeping darkness outside. But it is not enough. Annalise's eyes flicker open, heavy with exhaustion and the weight of grief. The soft golden light of the fire reflects in her dark eyes, and for a brief moment, she seems to be somewhere else, far from this lonely village, this desolate existence. She remembers days long past, days when her mother would hum softly as she prepared their meager meals, days when the smell of freshly baked bread would fill the air. Those days, it seems, belong to another life, a life that has been swallowed by time and sorrow. She turns her head, her eyes lingering on the small altar she has fashioned from bits of broken wood and iron, the remnants of a world that no longer exists. Atop the altar, a candle flickers weakly, its flame trembling against the wind that seeps through the cracks in the walls. The faint scent of melted wax fills the room, mixing with the lingering scent of earth and decay. Annalise's gaze softens for a moment, a fleeting trace of reverence on her face. She has prayed here every night since the sickness took her family. It is all she has left, this ritual, this fragile thread of faith that she clings in a world that no longer seems to care. Her fingers, stiff from the cold, tremble as she reaches out to the altar, the rough surface of the wood biting into her skin. She closes her eyes, whispering a prayer to the gods, any gods that may still hear her. But deep within, she knows that her prayers have gone unanswered for some time now. The village has been ravaged by the Black Death, the air thick with the stench of rot, the silence broken only by the occasional cry of despair. There is no mercy here, only the relentless passage of time and the inevitability of death. She rises from the floor, her body aching, every movement a reminder of how much has been shaped by hardship. The furs that once provided her warmth now feel like little more than a thin layer of protection against the cruel cold that permeates everything. As she moves across the room, the floor creaks beneath her feet, another sound that speaks of the slow collapse of this place. She opens a rickety wooden door, and the frigid air rushes in, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of wind. Outside, the village is shrouded in mist, the faint outline of the remaining houses barely visible through fog. The streets are empty, the homes abandoned, their windows dark like empty eyes. The market square, once a hub of life, is now nothing more than a ruin, a place where the voices of children once played and where merchants once peddled their wares. The stalls, now rotting, are little more than skeletons, the produce that once filled them now reduced to ash. Annalise pulls her cloak tighter around her thin frame, but it does little to protect her from the biting cold. She stares out into the village, her heart heavy with the weight of it all. She has not seen another soul for days, maybe longer. The last of her neighbors left weeks ago, driven by the plague or by despair. It does not matter anymore. She is alone now, alone in a world that has forgotten her. Her mind drifts back to the days before the sickness, before the village was emptied of its life. She remembers the sound of children playing, the laughter that echoed through the streets, the smell of fresh bread, and the vibrant colors of the market. But those days are gone now. The plague has swept through the village like wildfire, leaving nothing but empty homes, lifeless fields, and broken memories. Annalise is the last one left, or so she believes. As she walks through the abandoned streets, Her footsteps echo in the stillness, the sound unnervingly loud against the silence. Her eyes scan the empty homes, each one a tomb, a place that once held life. Her hand brushes against the rough stone of one house, her fingers tracing the lines of its crumbling walls. The house feels cold, as though it too has been abandoned by all that is good and warm. She pauses at the edge of the village, staring out at the fields that stretch beyond. The crops, once full and vibrant, are now withered and barren. The earth seems to have forgotten how to yield life, its soil dry and cracked, as though it too is grieving. Yet, in the distance, there is a faint glimmer of hope, a small patch of green amidst the desolation. Annalise's heart catches in her chest as she notices the small plot of land that her father once tended. The field had been their family's lifeline, their source of food and survival. Even now, in its state of neglect, it calls to her. She has not tended it in weeks, but she knows she must. There is no other choice. It is the last remaining part of her father's legacy, the last thread connecting her to the life she once knew. She begins a long walk toward the field, her steps slow and heavy, the weight of grief and fatigue pressing on her shoulders. The wind picks up, rustling the bare branches of the trees as she walks, their gnarled limbs reaching out like desperate hands. The sky, once bright and blue, is now a dull gray, as though it too is morning. As she reaches the edge of the field, Annalise stops and surveys the land. The earth is hard, the soil dry and unyielding, but there is a faint glimmer of life, the faintest trace of green shoots emerging from the earth. It is a small, fragile hope, but it is hope nonetheless. She kneels down, her fingers trembling as she digs into the soil, her hands covered in dirt. The cold seems to sink deeper into her bones, but she ignores it. There is work to be done. In the distance, a raven caws, its dark wings cutting through the air like a shadow. The bird perches on a branch in a nearby tree, its sharp eyes watching Annalise with unsettling focus. It is an omen, she knows. The raven has always been a symbol of death, a creature that haunts the edges of human existence. But Annalise is not afraid. She has learned to accept death as a constant companion, something that hovers just beyond the horizon, waiting. Her hands work steadily, pulling weeds to the earth, turning the soil with practiced ease. As she works, the raven remains perched above her, its dark eyes fixed upon her every movement. The wind grows colder, biting at her skin, but she continues, determined to reclaim some small measure of control over her world. The day wears on and the light begins to fade. Annalise stands up, wiping her brow, her body aching from the effort. The field is still far from thriving, but it is a small victory, a glimmer of life in a world that seems intent on destroying all that is good. As the sun sets, casting a soft glow over the landscape, she pauses and looks out at the horizon, her heart heavy with a mix of sorrow and determination. For the first time in days, she allows herself a small breath of relief. She has done something. She has survived another day. But as the last light of the day fades into darkness, Annalise knows that tomorrow will bring more struggles, more hardships. The plague still lingers, as does the ever-present threat of hunger and death. And yet, in the quiet of the night, as the wind howls and a raven watches from the trees, she holds on to something, a faint, fragile thread of hope that refuses to break. In this world, survival is not a victory, but a slow, painful dance with death. But for Annalise, it is the only choice she has left. Help? Who could possibly need help here, in this place of death and decay? Yet there is something in the stranger's eyes that suggests a story, a need, something far beyond mere survival. For a moment, Oswin considers turning them away. What could he offer the stranger, when all he has left is an empty forge in a village full of ghosts? But something stirs inside him, something he hasn't felt in what feels like an eternity. The faintest glimmer of purpose. "Come inside," he mutters, stepping aside to allow the stranger into the warmth of the forge. The figure steps forward, pulling back their hood to reveal a young man, no older than Oswin's own children had been before the plague had taken them. His face is drawn, pale from exhaustion and hunger, his eyes wide with fear, yet there is a determination in the setter's jaw, a silent plea for help. The young man looks around the forge, taking the empty space, the dying fire, the broken walls. He does not speak for a long moment, but his gaze lingers on the iron tools that hang on the wall, the half-forged sword lying on the anvil. "I've heard rumors," the young man says finally, his voice low. "They say the blacksmith here was once the finest in the land. That you can make anything. A sword to cut through stone, armor strong enough to turn aside a blade. Can you still do it?" Oswin stares at him, his mind reeling. A sword? The finest blacksmith? These words feel foreign to him now. There was a time when he would have been proud to hear such things. But now, all he feels is a hollow ache in his chest. His hands are no longer steady, his eyes no longer sharp. The forge is no longer the vibrant place of creation it once was. Now it is a place of slow decay, of silent sorrow. "I can make swords," Oswin says slowly, his voice rough. "But no sword will save you from what's coming." The young man's eyes flash with something fierce, anger, defiance, or perhaps something darker. "Then make it anyway," he demands. "Make it. I have nothing left but the will to fight. I will not die in the shadows of this world. I will not be swallowed by the plague, by the silence. You have the skill. I have the need. Help me, Oswin." For a moment, Oswin stands frozen, his mind torn between the past and the present, between the man he once was and the broken shell he has become. But the fire, weak as it is, stirs within him again, and he feels the stirrings of something he thought he had lost. With a deep sigh, Oswin moves toward the anvil once more, his hands reaching for the hammer. The rhythm of the forge begins again, slow at first, then growing stronger with each strike. The young man watches him, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. The clang of the hammer against iron fills the air, louder now, resonating with the hope that perhaps, after all, it is not too late to create something. The forge may be broken, the village may be lost, but in this moment, Oswin finds a small piece of himself again, a fragment of purpose in a world that seems intent on forgetting him. He has no illusions about the future, but for now, he will keep the fire burning. The sound of hooves pounding against frozen earth is the only thing that breaks the stillness of the forest. The wind howls through the bare branches, carrying with it the bitter sting of winter, but Sigurd does not feel it. His thick cloak, heavy with the fur of northern beasts, shields him from the cold, but it does little to protect him from the weight of the world. The forest is bleak, the trees skeletal figures that reach for the sky with gnarled fingers, grasping at the heavens as though begging for salvation. The ground beneath his horse's hooves is frozen hard, the earth crackling with every step, as though even the land itself resents his passage. Sigurd presses forward, his horse's breath steaming in the frigid air. The road he rides is ancient, its stones covered in moss and thick with the decay of seasons long gone. He does not know how long he has been riding, days, weeks, perhaps longer. The sun never seems to rise fully, and the days blur into one another, marked only by the rising and falling of the wind and the occasional cry of an owl or the rustle of something unseen in the underbrush. The kingdom he once knew is gone, lost to the plague that has swept to the land like a tidal wave, leaving nothing in its wake but death and emptiness. Sigurd, a knight by birth and oath, had once stood tall in the royal courts, the proud son of a lord who had fought to maintain the strength of their kingdom. But all that is now a distant memory, swallowed by the relentless march of time and suffering. His armor, once gleaming with the promise of valor, now carries the dull patina of neglect. His once proud sword hangs at his side, its edge rusting with the passage of days. The weight of his duties, honor, loyalty, protection, feels like a distant echo, drowned out by the constant din of loss. His mission is a forgotten one. The letters he carries, sealed with a royal crest, have long since lost their significance. He no longer remembers the names of the people he was supposed to protect, or the Lord he was sworn to serve. His mind is consumed by something darker now, the fear of the plague that continues to ravage the land, and the despair that comes with knowing that his journey may be meaningless. The wind picks up, biting at Sigurd's skin, and he pulls his cloak tighter around his shoulders. His horse's pace slows, as if it too is feeling the toll of the journey. He urges the animal forward, but it is clear that the animal's strength is waning, just as his own is. The forest seems to close in around him, its dark shadows pressing in, and Sigurd feels a growing sense of dread. He cannot remember the last time he saw a village, or heard the laughter of children, or smelled the scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. All of those things seem like fragments of a life that he can no longer touch, mere ghosts that haunt him in the silence. He can still remember the last village he passed through, an empty place, its streets covered in mud, the houses abandoned and decaying. The people had been gone for weeks, perhaps longer, leaving only the rotting remnants of a once thriving community. The air had been thick with the scent of death, and Sigurd had ridden through without a second thought, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he would never see any of these places again. His thoughts are interrupted by the sudden sound of hooves in the distance. His hand tightens on the reins as he scans the horizon, his eyes narrowing against the harsh wind. There is no one here. There is no one left to ride toward him. But the sound persists louder now, and Sigurd's pulse quickens. Could it be another rider? Could there be someone else in this forsaken world? Someone who has managed to survive the plague? The sound grows closer, and Sigurd's heart leaps in his chest. He spurs his horse forward, his gaze fixed on the distant trees. The forest seems apart before him, the path narrowing, the hooves growing louder still. And then through the trees he sees a figure, a lone rider, cloaked in furs, their face obscured by the shadow of their hood. The rider moves slowly, cautiously, as if aware of the danger that lies in this desolate world. Sigurd's breath catches in his throat, and he pulls his horse to a stop. He does not know why, but something about this rider feels different, feels like the answer to something he has been searching for, though he is not sure what. The rider does not approach immediately, and for a moment, Sigurd wonders if they, too, are afraid of what the other might bring. But then, the rider's horse comes to a halt, and the two men lock eyes across the space between them. The rider speaks first, their voice low, but strong. "You are far from your home. Knight, what brings you to these lands?" Sigurd hesitates, his mouth dry. For a moment, he does not know how to answer. He has not spoken to another soul in so long that the sound of his own voice feels foreign to him. I am searching," he says finally, his voice hoarse from disuse. Searching for answers, for any remnants of life in a world that has forgotten what it means to live. The rider regards him silently for a moment, their eyes sharp and assessing. Then they speak again, their tone softer, but no less intense. "You seek the dead, Knight. There is no life left here, no answers to be found. The plague has taken all of us, and what remains is nothing but ash and ruin." Sigurd's heart sinks at the rider's words, but there is something in their voice that resonates with him. This is not just another survivor, clinging to life by the skin of their teeth. This is someone who understands, someone who has seen the same horrors he has seen, someone who has lived to the same despair. For the first time in a long while, Sigurd feels a flicker of something like connection, like understanding. Perhaps it is foolish to think that anyone could still understand the depths of what has been lost, but for this brief moment, he allows himself the thought that maybe, just maybe, there is still someone out there who can share the burden of the grief he carries. "I was once a knight," Sigurd says quietly, as if speaking the words aloud will help him make sense of them. "But now, I am nothing but a shadow, wandering in a world that no longer has a place for me. I do not know what I seek anymore, only that I cannot stop searching." The rider nods, their face softening with a mixture of pity and resignation. "We are all searching for something, Knight, but the search leads only to darkness." The wind howls again, whipping through the trees, and for a long while neither of them speaks. The forest seems to hold its breath, as though waiting for something to happen, for some change to come, but nothing stirs. Sigurd feels the weight of the moment settle heavily upon him, and in the silence, he begins to realize something he has been denying for far too long. The world he once knew is gone. The kingdom is gone. The people are gone. His life, as it once was, is lost. There is no honor to be found here, no glory to be claimed. The plague has swept away everything he once believed in, and there is nothing left but the cold, the wind, and the endless, suffocating silence. But even as these thoughts wash over him, Sigurd feels something stir deep inside, a small, fragile spark of something he cannot quite name. It is not hope. It is not faith, but it is something that pushes him forward, something that refuses to let him simply give up and die. The rider before him seems to understand this, for they too stand at the edge of something darker than the world itself, yet something that still refuses to let them fall. "You are right," Sigurd says at last, his voice steady. "There is nothing left here. But there must be something beyond this place, something worth fighting for, even if I do not know what it is." The rider's eyes soften, and for the briefest of moments, Sigurd sees a flicker of recognition, of something shared. "Then perhaps you should keep searching," they say quietly, "because that is all we can do now." The two riders remain there, gazing at each other across the distance, the silence of the forest pressing in on them. But within that silence, something unspoken passes between them, an understanding, a mutual recognition that they are both caught in the same storm, struggling to find their way in a world that has forgotten what it means to live. As the rider turns and disappears into the trees, Sigurd remains behind, his heart heavy but his resolve hardened. The path ahead is uncertain, the future dark and uncertain, but for the first time in what feels like forever, he has found something, however fleeting, however fragile, that will carry him through the days to come. The hooves of his horse echo in the distance, the only sound that remains as Sigurd continues his journey through the endless night. The road may be empty, the world may be dead, but he will keep searching, driven by something that even the plague cannot take from him, his will to survive. The moon hangs low in the sky, heavy with an ancient weight, casting an eerie glow over the silent landscape. Alfric walks alone through the forest, his cloak a tattered shadow against the pale light. The frost crunches beneath his boots, each step a sharp reminder of the world's slow decay. The trees around him stand like twisted sentinels, their branches bare and gnarled, reaching out like skeletal hands. The air is thick with cold, each breath a cloud that vanishes into the void. The world feels still, as if even the earth itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to end. Alfric feels the weight of it all, his heart heavy, his body tired. His once vibrant eyes, filled with hope and ambition, are now dull, as if the life has been drained from them. His face, unshaven and worn, reflects the harshness of the world he has endured. The plague has taken everything from him, his family, his village, his hope. His wife, Eleanor, had been the first to fall. The sickness came swiftly, a shadow creeping through the town, devouring the living like a cruel, unstoppable tide. She had been feverish for days, her skin pale and clammy, her breath shallow. He had watched helplessly as the light in her eyes dimmed, until she was nothing but a shell of the woman he had once known. Then came the children, his son Leofric, who had been just old enough to begin to understand the world, his daughter Edgith, who had laughed at the smallest things, her innocence untouched by the darkness of the world. They had all succumbed to the same fate. Alfric could remember the way his son had clung to his arm, whispering through tears that he didn't want to die. He could remember the way Edgith had held his hand tightly, as if she knew that no matter how hard she tried, nothing would stop the death that was creeping toward them all. He had tried to save them. He had tried everything. He had gone to the priest, begging for prayers. He had sought out the healer, hoping for a miracle. But there had been no miracle. There was only death, lingering like a shadow over their lives, until there was nothing left. Now, Alfric is a man broken by grief, a shell of who he once was. His once proud village lies in ruins behind him, a place abandoned by all but the dead. He has left it behind, unable to bear the sight of the empty streets, the shattered homes. The villagers, the ones who had survived, have fled or perished. Alfric is now a solitary figure in a world that has forgotten him, a man wandering through a land that no longer holds any meaning. He feels as though he is walking in a dream, the edges of the world blurry, distant. There is no direction, no purpose, no future. The path before him stretches endlessly, winding through the trees, disappearing into the shadows. He is unsure where it leads, but he walks anyway. There is nothing else to do. He has nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The cold wind blows again, biting at his skin, but Alfric does not feel it. His body is numb, as if he is no longer truly a part of this world. The silence is suffocating, the isolation unbearable. As he walks, Alfric's mind drifts back to the last moments he had spent with his family. He can still remember Eleanor's smile, so full of life, so full of love. He remembers how they had laughed together, how they had dreamed of a future, of their children growing up, of their home filled with warmth and light. He remembers their shared meals, the fire that crackled on the hearth, the simple joys that now feel like a distant fantasy. It was all taken away in the blink of an eye, swept away by the cruel, invisible force of the plague. Alfred's fingers tightened around the worn leather of his cloak. He had failed them. He had been unable to protect them. The guilt gnaws at him, sharper than any physical wound. Every step he takes feels like a betrayal, a reminder that he had been powerless to stop the inevitable. The forest around him begins to grow darker, the shadows lengthening as the night deepens. The trees seem to close in, their branches reaching out like the hands of the dead, as though they are trying to pull him into the earth itself. Alfred's breath quickens, his pulse racing. He begins to feel the weight of his solitude pressing in on him, the isolation becoming a living thing that wraps itself around his chest, squeezing the air from his lungs. He can almost hear the voices of his family calling to him from the darkness, their cries echoing in the wind. Suddenly, Alfred's foot catches on a root, and he stumbles, falling to his knees. The cold earth presses against his skin, and for a moment he remains there, unmoving. He closes his eyes, feeling the weight of the world on top of him. He feels as though he might drown in his grief, swallowed by the emptiness that has become his life. He thinks of his children, their faces so full of life and innocence. He thinks of Eleanor, her voice, her laughter. It all feels like a dream now, something that could never have truly existed. But then, as if to answer his despair, a soft sound reaches his ears. It is faint at first, barely more than a whisper carried on the wind, but it grows louder, clearer, a voice calling his name. Alfred's heart lurches in his chest, and he rises to his feet, his breath catching in his throat. The voice is familiar, and for a moment, he thinks he might be dreaming. He looks around, his eyes scanning the dark forest, but there is no one. The woods are empty, the only sound the rustling of the leaves in the wind. The voice calls again, louder now. It is unmistakable. Eleanor. Alfred's heart beats faster, his mind racing. Could it be? Could she have survived? He takes a step forward, then another, his body trembling with a mix of fear and hope. He begins to move faster, his pace quickening as the voice calls to him once more, beckoning him forward. The trees seem to part before him, and he pushes through them, his hands brushing against the rough bark, his heart pounding in his chest. And then he sees her, standing in the clearing ahead, bathed in the pale light of the moon. Eleanor. Alfred's breath catches in his throat as he stares at her, unable to believe his eyes. She is there. Her face is beautiful as he remembers, her eyes shining with the same warmth and love that once filled their home. She stands before him, as if waiting for him to come closer. For a moment, he is frozen in place, his mind struggling to understand what he is seeing. But then, as if sensing his hesitation, Eleanor takes a step toward him, her arms outstretched. "Alfred," she says softly, her voice like the sound of wind through the trees. "You must come home. You are not alone." The words are like a balm to his broken soul. His legs move without thinking, carrying him toward her, toward the warmth he had long believed was lost in him forever. But just as he reaches her, she fades from view, her figure dissolving into the night air, leaving nothing but the cold emptiness of the forest. Alfred stumbles to a halt, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His heart aches as a vision fades away, the sound of her voice lost to the wind. He stands there in the darkness, his mind racing, his body trembling. He has been chasing a phantom, a dream, a memory. Eleanor is gone, as are their children. There is no coming home. Tears sting his eyes, but he does not allow them to fall. He has cried enough. The grief, the pain, the longing, it all clings to him, suffocates him. But he will not let it consume him. He has lost everything, but he is still here. He is still alive. Alfred takes a deep breath, steadying himself. The path ahead is uncertain, the world around him broken and silent. But for the first time in what feels like forever, he takes a step forward, not in pursuit of lost love, but in search of a future, however uncertain it may be. The moon above him flickers, casting its cold light on the world that has been forever changed. and Alfred walks on, the sound of his footsteps the only thing that remains in the empty forest. The wind howls the ruins of the village, a bitter, unrelenting force that carries with the scent of decay and death. The once thriving settlement now stands silent, its houses abandoned, its streets covered in a thick layer of dust and ash. Godric stands at the edge of the square, his eyes sweeping over the broken landscape. The familiar sights that once filled him with pride now serve only as a reminder of what has been lost. The village had once been a place of life, full of laughter, the clatter of carts, and the smoke of hearth fires rising into the sky. Now, it is nothing more than a hushed graveyard, its bones picked clean by the plague that has ravaged the land. Godric's heart aches as he surveys the empty homes, the faded remnant of a life he can never return to. He takes a step forward, his boots sinking into the earth that once thrived with crops. There is no longer any green here, only the gray of death. The plague had taken his family first, his wife, Alina, and their 2 children, Alfric and Elswith. They had fallen sick within days of each other, the fever rising in their bodies with a speed that left no time for prayer, no time for hope. Godric had tried, of course. He had sought the village healer, a woman named Edith, known for her skill in curing ailments. But even she had been powerless against the disease. Godric had watched helplessly as the light faded from his wife's eyes, then from his children's faces, until he was left alone with the specter of his own guilt. A sharp chill cuts through the air as Godric pulls his cloak tighter around his shoulders. He feels the cold deeply, as though the frost has sunk into his very bones, but it is the ache in his chest that truly grips him. He had been a man of faith once. He had believed in God's will, in the power of prayer, in the sanctity of life. But that was before the plague, before the world he had known had crumbled to dust. Now, the prayers feel empty, the faith fragile. He no longer knows what he believes, or if he believes in anything at all. The wind whispers through the broken windows of the church, its eerie sound carrying across the square. Godric's gaze drifts toward the building, the only structure that still stands relatively intact. The stone walls are weathered and cracked, the wooden doors hanging ajar as though the church itself has abandoned its duty. But Godric cannot bring himself to approach. He is too broken, too lost to seek solace in the place where he once found comfort. Instead, he turns away, walking through the empty streets, his footsteps the only sound that breaks the silence. The village that had been home to so many, that had sheltered him and his family, now feels like a foreign land. The homes are empty, the fields abandoned. The once bustling market square is now a graveyard of overturned carts and rotting food, the stench of death clinging to everything. As Godric walks, his mind drifts back to the days before the plague, when life had seemed so certain. He had been a simple farmer, content with his work, his family, his small plot of land. He had taken pride in the harvest he brought in the way his children had learned the rhythms of the earth. Alina had been the light of his life, the one who held their family together with her warmth and kindness. The memory of her smile, her laughter, is like a knife to his heart, cutting deep into the wound that is never healed. Godric had not been prepared for this. No one had been. How could anyone have known that something as invisible as the plague could tear apart everything they had worked for, everything they had loved? He had thought they were safe, living in a quiet village far from the dangers of the world. But safety had been an illusion, and now all that was left was a vast emptiness that threatened to swallow him whole. A sudden noise breaks his reverie. The sound of hooves, faint but unmistakable. Godric pauses, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of the knife at his belt. But then he sees them, a rider, cloaked in furs, riding to the gates of the village. The rider moves slowly, deliberately, as though they, too, are wary of this desolate place. Godric stands still, watching as the rider dismounts and approaches. The figure is tall, their face obscured by a hood, but there is something about their presence that feels familiar. They stop before Godric, and for a long moment, neither speaks. The wind ruffles their cloak, and the silence stretches out like a vast chasm between them. Finally, the rider speaks, their voice low and rough, as though it has not been used in some time. "I thought I was the last one," they say. The last one left. Godric's heart skips a beat. The last one? It's a sentiment he knows all too well. He, too, has felt the weight of being the only survivor in a world that no longer makes sense. The rider takes a step closer, their face still hidden, but there is something in their posture, something weary, something broken. That resonates with him. "Who are you?" Godric asks, his voice hoarse from disuse. The words feel strange coming from his mouth, as if he has not spoken to another soul in years. The rider lifts their hood, revealing a face worn by time and hardship. It is a face Godric knows, one he had not seen in many years. "It's me," the rider says softly, a faint smile playing at the corners of their lips. "It's Adela." Godric's breath catches in his throat. Adela. She had been a childhood friend, someone he had once been close to before his marriage to Alina, before the responsibilities of family and land had consumed him. Adela had left the village years ago, seeking a different life, one that was not tied to the earth and the harshness of farming. Godric had heard little from her since, and now, here she was, standing before him in the aftermath of everything. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, as though unsure what to say. The silence between them is thick, heavy with the weight of years of loss, of the unspoken grief that hangs in the air. "I thought you were dead," Godric finally says, his voice faltering. "I thought everyone was dead." Adela shakes her head, her eyes shadowed with sorrow. "I have seen death, Godric. I have seen what this plague does to people. But I am not dead. Not yet." Godric feels a pang of something. Hope, perhaps, or the faintest trace of relief at hearing her words. But it is fleeting. The emptiness returns, wrapping itself around him like a cloak. "There's nothing left here," he says quietly. "Nothing but ruin." Adela looks around, taking in the devastation. "I know," she says softly. "I've seen it all too. But we are still here, you and I, and as long as we are here, there is still something left." Her words hang in the air, and for the first time in a long while, Godric feels a flicker of something, a sense of connection, a small ember of life in a world that feels otherwise cold and barren. "I can't stay here," Godric says, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't bear to look at it anymore. I can't bear to stay in a place where everything I loved is gone." Adela nods, her gaze soft but resolute. "I understand," she says. "But you don't have to be alone, Godric. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself. I know the world is broken, but there is still life out there. Perhaps not in the way we remember, but it's still there, waiting for us to find it." Godric looks at her, and for the first time in what feels like years, he allows himself to believe that perhaps there is something beyond the ashes of his past. Perhaps there is still something worth living for, something worth fighting for. Together, they stand in the ruins of the village, two survivors of a world that has been forever altered by the plague. The wind howls around them, but for a moment, they do not feel so alone. The road ahead is uncertain, the world still broken, but there's a flicker of hope, small, fragile, but undeniable, that perhaps, in the end, they will find a way to carry on. And so, they walk together, leaving the village behind, uncertain of what lies ahead, but determined to face it together. The sky hangs low and heavy, as though the heavens themselves are weeping for the world below. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the lingering odor of sickness, a stench that clings to the stone walls of the abbey like a shadow that will never lift. Ildred, a monk once devoted to the service of God, stands in the small garden behind the abbey, his hands pressed together in silent prayer. His once shining robes, now worn and threadbare, hang loosely from his frame. The weight of his years, coupled with the heavy burden of the plague, has drained the vitality from him, leaving only a shell of the man he once was. The garden, once a place of beauty and peace, is now a silent wasteland. The flowers that once bloomed here are dead, their petals withered and brown, their fragrance long since vanished. The fountain, which had once provided the soothing sound of trickling water, is dry, its stone basin cracked and broken. The trees that once provided shade and solace now stand twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands toward a sky that offers no relief. The once vibrant green grass is now yellow and brittle, its life drained away by the same sickness that has ravaged the world. Ildred stares out over the desolation, his eyes hollow and tired. His once strong faith has been tested to its breaking point in these dark times. The plague, which has swept the land like a merciless tide, has claimed the lives of so many, his fellow monks, the villagers, his friends, and even the children who had once filled the abbey with laughter and life. He had prayed for them all, lifting his voice in desperate supplication, asking for God's mercy, but the disease had not relented. It had taken everyone, and Ealdred had watched helplessly as one by one the faithful around him succumbed to the sickness, their bodies weak and wasted, their eyes empty and pleading. It had begun months ago, creeping into the abbey like an invisible shadow. First, it had taken Brother Oswin, the young novice who had been so full of life, so eager to serve God. Ealdred had watched as Oswin's body grew weak with fever, his once rosy cheeks turning pale and sunken. The boy had died within days, his body cold, and still before Ealdred could offer the last rites. Then came Brother Aldhelm, the abbey's healer, who had been helpless against the sickness despite his knowledge of herbs and potions. Ealdred had seen him grow weaker with each passing day, his hands trembling as he tried and failed to save his fellow monks. Brother Aldhelm had died in his sleep, his last breath a whispered prayer for God's mercy. And now Ealdred is alone. The abbey, once bustling with the voices of the faithful, is silent. The chapel is empty, the candles flickering weakly in the cold air. The choir stalls are vacant, the sound of hymns and chants lost to the wind. The kitchens, once filled with the smells of freshly baked bread and roasting meats, are cold and empty. There is no one left to tend to the needs of the abbey, no one to carry on the work that had once been so vital to the community. Only Ealdred remains, wandering through the halls like a ghost, his steps echoing off the cold stone floors. He has lost his sense of purpose. He has lost his faith. The plague has stolen everything from him, his brothers, his community, his sense of duty. He no longer knows what he is supposed to do. The world he had once believed in, the world of prayer and devotion, has been shattered by the relentless tide of death. The God he had served with unwavering devotion now seems distant, unreachable, as if he has abandoned the world to its suffering. Ealdred cannot help but wonder why God has allowed this to happen. Why has he let the innocent suffer, the faithful perish? Why has he taken everything Ealdred held dear? The question gnaws at him, a constant ache that refuses to be ignored. He had spent his life in service to God, believing that if he lived a humble life, if he prayed diligently and worked to spread the faith, God would bless him and his community. But now, all those prayers seem meaningless. The abbey is in ruins, his brothers are gone, and the world outside is ravaged by disease. There is no solace to be found in the words of Scripture, no comfort in the rituals that had once brought him peace. Ealdred sinks to his knees in the middle of the garden, his hands pressed together in prayer, but his words falter in his throat. He can no longer find the strength to speak, no longer know what to ask for. His heart is heavy with grief, his soul burdened by doubt. The silence of the abbey seems oppressing on him, suffocating him. And for the first time in his life, Ealdred feels utterly abandoned by God. But then, a sound reaches his ears, a faint rustling in the distance. Ealdred raises his head, his heart skipping a beat. Is it another survivor? Is there another soul left in this desolate place? He rises slowly, his legs stiff from kneeling, and walks toward the sound. As he moves to the garden, the rustling grows louder, and soon he sees a figure standing at the edge of the abbey grounds. It is a woman, her face hidden beneath a thick veil, her posture rigid and tense. She holds something in her hands, a bundle wrapped in cloth, and she stands there, staring at the abbey as if searching for something or someone. Ealdred approaches cautiously, his footsteps silent on the broken earth. When he reaches her, he stops, unsure what to say. The woman does not notice him at first, lost in her thoughts. But when she finally turns and sees him, her eyes widen in surprise. Are you the last one?" she asks, her voice low but steady, like the sound of a distant bell. Ealdred nods slowly, his throat tight. "Yes, I am the last." The woman studies him for a moment, her gaze sharp and searching. "I heard rumors," she says, "that the plague had claimed this place. But I didn't believe it. I thought there might be someone left. I thought I could find some solace here." Ealdred feels a pang of something deep within him, a flicker of hope, or perhaps recognition. He feels as though he knows this woman, but the memory eludes him. "What is it you seek?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman steps closer, her hands trembling as she unravels the cloth she has been holding. Inside is a small, fragile bundle, a child no older than a year, wrapped in layers of torn cloth. The child is pale, sickly, but alive. "My child," the woman says softly. "I found him abandoned in the fields. His parents must have died. He has no one left. I thought perhaps you could help him." Eldred stares at the child, his heart lurching in his chest. He has not seen a child in so long, not since the plague took his own brothers. For a moment, he does not know what to do. The weight of his doubts, his grief, his loss presses on him, and he is unsure if he is capable of helping this child. But something in him stirs, something that has been dormant for so long, buried beneath the weight of despair. He cannot explain it, but in that moment, he feels something like a spark of life return to him. I will help him," Eldred says, his voice shaky but resolute. "I will try." The woman looks at him, her face softening with relief. "Thank you," she whispers. "Thank you for offering him hope." Eldred takes the child gently in his arms, feeling the fragile weight of life in his hands. As he looks down at the child, a strange sense of peace washes over him. The darkness that has consumed him for so long seems to lift just slightly. He is no longer alone. There is still life, still hope, still something worth living for. In that moment, Eldred realizes something he has not understood until now. The plague has taken so much, but it has not taken everything. There is still love. There is still mercy. There is still faith, though it may look different than it once did. The path forward will not be easy, and the world will never be the same. But Eldred knows that he must continue, for the child, for the woman, and for the hope that lies within them all. He cradles the child in his arms and turns toward the abbey. The night is still, the silence profound, but Eldred feels, for the first time in a long while, a sense of purpose. He may not know all the answers, and he may never understand the reasons for the suffering he has endured, but he knows that he must carry on, for himself, for this child, for the faith that is still, somewhere deep inside him, waiting to be rediscovered. The sound of hooves thunders through night, reverberating off the hills that surround the broken battlefield. A single rider, clad in the tattered armor of a fallen knight, moves through the fog like a ghost. The moon, a pale crescent in the sky, casts weak light on the churned earth beneath, turning the soil to mud stained with blood. The air is heavy with the smell of death and smoke, and the distant wail of the dying echoes across the horizon. Oswin, young and barely more than a boy, grips the reins of his horse, his hands trembling. His heart pounds his chest as if it might burst at any moment. He had been a squire just a few days ago, full of dreams of glory, of knighthood, of proving his worth. But all that feels like a distant memory now, buried beneath the weight of the battlefield. The screams of the dying and the stench of decay. The world he had once believed in has been shattered, torn apart by war and plague, leaving only the remnants of what was. The battle had been fierce, a brutal clash between two factions that had long held animosity toward each other. Oswin's lord, Sir Aldred, had led his forces into the fray with unshaken resolve, promising victory and honor. But the enemy had been relentless, their numbers overwhelming, their swords sharp with the fury of desperation. Sir Aldric, brave and steadfast, had fought valiantly, but in the end, even his skill and valor were not enough. He had fallen with the rest of his men, his blood staining the earth beneath him, leaving Oswin standing alone on the field of death. Oswin had barely escaped with his life. The horse beneath him is worn and exhausted, its sides heaving with each strained breath. He urges it forward, the creature responding with a labored trot, as if it, too, senses the weight of the world upon its back. He had tried to rally the men, to lift their spirits, but they had been too broken, too consumed by fear. In the end, it had been every man for himself. Oswin had fled, abandoning his duty, abandoning the very ideals that had once driven him to become a squire. But now, as the world around him collapses, he cannot help but wonder if he will ever find redemption for his cowardice. As the fog thickens, the sound of distant voices cuts through the air, a low murmur, like the whispering of the wind. Oswin pulls his horse to a stop, his breath caught in his throat. He dismounts carefully, his legs unsteady beneath him. The sound of voices grows louder, more distinct, and Oswin realizes that they are not the voices of men. They are the cries of women and children. His heart tightens. He knows what that means. Refugees, survivors. The plague had swept through the villages long before the war had reached these lands. Whole towns have been decimated, their people either succumbing to disease or fleeing in search of safety. The road to the nearest city had become a path of misery, with the sick and dying abandoned along the way, their bodies littering the streets like discarded refuse. Oswin's village had been spared, for a time, but when the war had come, the lines between enemy and ally had blurred, and the suffering had only deepened. There was no sanctuary anymore, no place to hide from the cruelty of the world. Oswin moves toward the voices, his heart heavy with mixture of fear and guilt. He is a squire, a warrior in training, but in the face of the suffering, he feels small, powerless. What use is a sword when the enemy is invisible? What use is courage when the world itself seems intent on unraveling? He reaches a clearing, and there they are, the survivors, a small group of women and children huddled together, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow with the weight of despair. Some are clutching bundles of rags. Others have no possessions at all. Their clothes are torn, their feet bare, their bodies covered in sores and dirt. The plague has claimed many of them, and yet they remain, holding on to life as though it is a fragile thread that might snap at any moment. A woman, her face pale and gaunt, looks up at Oswin, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. "Please," she whispers, her voice hoarse from days of travel without food or water. "Can you help us? Please." Oswin opens his mouth to speak, but no words come. He is unsure what he can offer them. He has nothing. No provisions, no shelter, no strength left to give. All he has is a memory of a dream that feels so far away now. The dream of becoming a knight, of standing tall in the face of danger, of defending the helpless. But that dream is slipping through his fingers like sand, and the reality of the world is cruel and unyielding. The woman watches him, her expression pleading. "We have nowhere to go," she says softly. "No one is left. They are all dead. We." Before she can finish, a child, no older than 4 or 5, stumbles forward from the group. His eyes are wide with fear, his small hands reaching out to Oswin, as if he knows something that the others do not. "Help," the child whispers, his voice breaking. "Please." Oswin's heart breaks. He kneels before the child, his hands trembling as he reaches out to the tiny figure. The boy is sick, his skin is pale, his body too frail for his age. But there is something in the child's gaze, something so pure and innocent, that it pierces to the despair that had consumed Oswin's soul. This child, this innocent soul, is a living reminder of everything Oswin has lost, and everything he is still capable of saving. He stands, his legs weak but steadying under him, and turns to the group of survivors. "I don't have much," he says, his voice low but firm. "But I will help you. I will protect you." The words feel strange on his tongue, as though they are an echo of a person he no longer recognizes. He had once wanted to be a knight, a man of valor and honor. He had dreamed of glory, of wielding a sword in battle, of becoming a hero in stories told around the fire. But now, in this moment, he realizes that true heroism is not found in the heat of battle or the clash of steel. It is found in the willingness to care for the weakest, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Oswin looks at the woman, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and relief. "I will find food. I will find water. I will find shelter. Stay here. Keep your children close." The woman nods, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispers. "Thank you for saving us." Oswin walks away, his heart pounding in his chest. He knows that the road ahead will be fraught with danger. He knows that the world is broken, that the plague and the war have left nothing but destruction in their wake. But in this moment, as he looks back at the small group of survivors, he realizes something. They are the future. They are the ones who will rebuild what has been lost. And perhaps, in helping them, Oswin will find the redemption he has been searching for. The redemption that comes not from glory, but from the quiet act of kindness and courage in the face of overwhelming darkness. As he disappears into mist, the voices of the survivors fade behind him, and the weight of his duty settles upon his shoulders. There is no glory in this fight, no medals to be won. There is only survival and the promise of something better, something that may yet rise from the ashes of the world that has fallen. The moonlight breaks through clouds above, casting a pale glow on the path ahead. Oswin rides forward, determined to make a difference, one small act at a time.